The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Eleanor Hartwell stumbled into Silver Ridge, her dress torn at the hem, her face bruised purple along the jawline. 3 days she'd been walking through the desert after throwing herself from that coach. 3 days since she'd refused to marry Clayton Morse, the cattle baron who'd bought her father's debts, and decided a daughter came with the deal. Her hand trembled as she reached into her bodice, pulling out the only thing of value she had left, her mother's sapphire ring, the last piece of the woman who died bringing her into this harsh world. The general store loomed before her, its weathered sign creaking in the hot wind. Food, water, a horse, maybe. Anything to get further from Clayton's reach. Before we continue with Eleanor's desperate journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. Eleanor pushed through the door, and every head in the store turned. She felt their stares like brands on her skin, the proper ladies clutching their parcels tighter, the men's eyes traveling over her disheveled state with calculation she'd learned to recognize and fear. "I need supplies," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She held up the ring, the sapphire catching the light filtering through the dusty window. "This should cover." "That won't be necessary." The voice came from the back corner, deep and certain as bedrock. Eleanor turned to see a man unfold himself from where he'd been examining saddle leather. He stood well over 6 feet, his shoulders broad enough to block the sun, his arms corded with muscle that spoke of years working cattle and land. Dark hair fell past his collar, and his eyes, gray as storm clouds, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Jacob Thornton," he said, not offering his hand, but nodding with respect. "You look like you need help, not charity. My ranch is 2 miles west. I need someone who can cook, clean, handle accounts. You do that, you earn your keep, fair and square." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the ring. I'm not." "You're not property," Jacob said quietly, his eyes flicking to the bruise on her jaw. "You're a person who needs work, and I'm a man who needs help. Simple as that." Something in his directness, the absence of pity or predation in his gaze, made Eleanor's defenses crack just slightly. "I can cook. My father ran a hotel before." She stopped, unwilling to speak of how gambling debts had destroyed everything. "That's all I need to know." Jacob turned to the shopkeeper. "Put together supplies for Miss Hartwell, Eleanor Hartwell. Miss Hartwell, charge it to my account." He looked back at her. "Keep your ring. Some things aren't meant to be traded." The Thornton Ranch sprawled across a valley where the earth turned from dust to grassland, hemmed in by red rock formations that glowed like embers at sunset. The house was sturdy timber and stone, clearly built by hands that knew harsh winters and the importance of solid walls. Jacob showed Eleanor to a small room off the kitchen, clean, spare, with a window facing east. "You lock this door from the inside," he said, pointing to the heavy bolt. "No one enters without your permission, not even me." That night, Eleanor lay in the first real bed she'd known in weeks and allowed herself to cry. Not from fear, for once, but from the strange, unfamiliar sensation of being seen as human. The work proved harder than managing her father's hotel. Jacob ran 200 head of cattle, employed 3 ranch hands, and seemed to operate on 4 hours of sleep. Eleanor woke before dawn to start breakfast, spent her days cleaning, mending, keeping the books that tracked every calf born and every dollar spent. But Jacob never demanded. He asked, "Would you mind?" And "Could you help with?" And when she burned the first batch of biscuits, he'd simply said, "Even the best cooks have off days," before eating them without complaint. 2 weeks in, she found him in the barn after midnight, his shirt stripped off as he worked by lantern light to repair a broken stall. The scars on his back told their own story. Long, pale lines that spoke of violence survived. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning. "So should you." Eleanor set down the coffee she'd brought. "Those scars, my father's belt. He believed hard work and harder punishment made men strong." Jacob's hands stilled on the wood. He was wrong. They just make men mean, or they make them leave. You left at 16, came back at 23 to bury him and take what was mine by right. He turned to face her, and in the lantern light, his eyes held depths of old pain. "I swore I'd never raise a hand in anger, not to beast, not to woman, not to child." Eleanor stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "The way you are, this careful kindness, it's not weakness. Neither is needing help." His gaze dropped to the fading bruise on her jaw. "You want to tell me who did that?" She did. She told him everything about Clayton Morse and his assumption that her father's debts made her his possession, about throwing herself from the moving coach, about 3 days walking through desert heat with nothing but fear driving her forward. Jacob listened without interruption, his jaw tightening incrementally with each detail. When she finished, he said simply, "He won't touch you again. You have my word. I'm not your responsibility." "No." Jacob's voice softened. "But you're under my roof, and that means something. Out here, we protect our own." Our own. The words settled into Eleanor's chest like warmth. The lessons started the next week. Jacob woke her before dawn, led her to the corral, where a paint mare waited. "This is Dancer. She's patient. You need to know how to ride. Really ride, in case you ever need to run again." Eleanor stared at the horse, then at Jacob. "I'll teach you." He helped her into the saddle, his hands firm on her waist, his voice steady with instruction. "Sit deep. Feel her movement. She'll tell you what she needs if you listen." Day after day, he taught her how to sit a trot without bouncing, how to guide with gentle pressure instead of force, how to read the landscape for water and shelter. And slowly, Eleanor felt something she hadn't known in years: competence, power, choice. One evening, 3 weeks into her stay, a stranger rode up to the house. Eleanor saw him from the kitchen window, a tall man in a tailored coat, his horse too fine for ranch work. Clayton Morse. Her blood turned to ice. She backed away from the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jacob was out checking the north fence line. The ranch hands were in the bunkhouse. She was alone with the man who'd bought her like livestock. The knock came, hard and demanding. "Eleanor, I know you're in there. Your little adventure is over. Time to come home and fulfill your obligations." She pressed her back against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. The door rattled as Clayton tried the handle. "Don't make this difficult. Your father's debts don't disappear because you run away. The law's on my side. The law says debts pass to family, not that family becomes property." Jacob's voice cut through Clayton's words like a blade through silk. Eleanor ran to the window to see him standing between the house and Clayton's horse, his stance relaxed but ready. "This doesn't concern you, cowboy." Clayton's tone dripped contempt. Eleanor Hartwell is promised to me by legal contract. No contract makes a person property. That was settled in 65. Jacob's voice remained level, but Eleanor heard the steel beneath. Miss Hartwell works here by choice. She's free to leave anytime she wants, but it'll be her choice, not yours. Clayton's hand moved toward his hip, where a pistol rode in a tooled leather holster. I paid good money. For debts, not for a woman. Jacob still hadn't moved, but something in his posture shifted. You can leave now, or I can make you leave. Your choice. The silence stretched, like a rope pulled taut. Then Clayton laughed, the sound ugly. This isn't over. That girl owes me, and I collect my debts. He wheeled his horse and galloped away, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. Eleanor burst from the house, her legs trembling. He'll come back. He always... Jacob caught her shoulders, his hands gentle but grounding. Look at me, Eleanor. When she met his eyes, he continued. You're not alone anymore. He wants a fight. He'll get one. But he won't take you. I promise you that. You can't promise. Yes, I can. His thumbs traced small circles on her shoulders, the touch sending unexpected warmth through her fear. I see a woman worth protecting, worth fighting for, if you'll let me. Eleanor realized she was shaking, not from fear this time, but from something else entirely. Jacob's presence, his solid certainty, the way he looked at her like she mattered beyond her usefulness, it terrified her more than Clayton's threats, because it made her want things she'd learned were dangerous to want. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk your life for someone you barely know? Jacob's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Because 5 years ago, I didn't fight for someone I should have. My wife, Sarah. She died in childbirth, and our daughter with her. I was out moving cattle when her time came, and by the time I got home, he stopped, his voice rough. I swore I'd never be too late again, never stand by when someone needed protection. Eleanor's hand rose of its own accord, her fingers brushing the rough stubble on his jaw. I'm sorry for your loss, but you can't save everyone to make up for. This isn't about making up for anything. His hand covered hers, pressing it against his face. This is about right now, and you standing here, and me not being able to ignore that you matter. The moments stretched between them, charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. Then Jacob stepped back, releasing her hand. You should get inside. Lock your door. I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Keep watch. She couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her start. Every shadow seemed to hold Clayton's shape. Around midnight, Eleanor gave up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and slipped out to the barn. Jacob sat in the hayloft, his rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the moonlit yard. He turned when he heard her climb the ladder. Can't sleep either? He asked. Eleanor shook her head, settling beside him in the hay. I keep thinking about what you said, about your wife. Sarah, Jacob's voice held old grief, worn smooth by time. She was brave, fierce. When we married, her family disowned her because I had nothing but this rough land and big dreams. She said dreams were worth more than money. She sounds remarkable. She was. He paused, then added quietly, she'd like you, I think. You've got that same steel spine under the fear. Eleanor pulled the shawl tighter. I don't feel steel. I feel broken. Broken things can heal. Jacob shifted to face her, his expression serious in the silver light. That bruise on your jaw, it's almost gone. The trembling in your hands when you cook, haven't seen that in a week. You're stronger than you think, Eleanor. I threw myself from a moving coach. Exactly. You chose pain over captivity. That's not weakness. That's the toughest choice there is. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the ranch settling around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The horses shuffled in their stalls below. "Tell me about the hotel," Jacob said finally, before it all went wrong. So Eleanor did. She told him about her father's pride in the establishment, about learning to manage staff and settle disputes and keep books balanced, about the dream she'd had of expanding, of creating something lasting. "You could still do that," Jacob said. "This ranch, it needs a manager with your skills. The books are a mess, the schedule's chaos. You've already made improvements I didn't know were possible. I'm just a cook and housekeeper." No, Jacob's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers threading through hers. "You're a woman who knows how to build something from nothing. That's worth more than gold out here." Eleanor's breath caught at the contact, at the warmth of his hand and the conviction in his voice. "Jacob!" A rifle shot cracked the night. Jacob was moving before the echo faded, pulling Eleanor down flat in the hay. "Stay here," he commanded, grabbing his rifle. Like hell, Eleanor's fear had transformed into anger. "If it's Clayton, I face him." Another shot, this one closer. Jacob swore under his breath, "Then stay behind me and do exactly what I say." They descended the ladder into chaos. The barn doors hung open, and in the yard, 3 men on horses circled like wolves. Clayton sat his mount in the center, a pistol smoking in his hand. "Enough games, Thornton," he shouted. "Send out what's mine, or I burn this whole place down." Jacob stepped into the yard, Eleanor a pace behind him, despite his protective stance. "Last chance to ride away, Morse." Clayton laughed. 3 against 1? I like those odds." 3 against 2, Eleanor said, stepping forward with the pistol she'd taken from Jacob's desk drawer. Her hands were steady, her aim true, "and I'm a better shot than you think." The surprise on Clayton's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so deadly. "Eleanor, don't be stupid. You can't." "I can choose," she interrupted, "and I choose to stand my ground." Jacob's ranch hands burst from the bunkhouse, rifles in hand. Suddenly, the odds had shifted dramatically. Clayton's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Sheriff Bradley rode into the yard, his badge glinting in the moonlight. "Got a telegram from a judge friend of mine. Seems Mr. Morse here has been pulling this forced marriage trick across 3 territories. Warrants out for fraud and coercion." He nodded to his deputies, who'd ridden in behind him. "Clayton Morse, you're under arrest." The fight went out of Clayton like air from a punctured bladder. As the deputies cuffed him and led him away, he shot Eleanor one last venomous look. "You'll regret this. You're nothing without—" "She's everything that matters." Jacob's words, spoken quiet but firm, cut through Clayton's venom. He turned to Eleanor, his gray eyes holding hers. "You're everything that matters," he repeated. The sheriff tipped his hat and rode off with his prisoner. The ranch hands, reading the moment, disappeared back into the bunkhouse. And suddenly Eleanor and Jacob stood alone in the moonlit yard. The crisis passed, leaving only truth between them. "Jacob, let me say this." He took her hands, the pistol now hanging loose in her grip. "I know it's too soon. I know you've been through hell and need time to heal. But I need you to know, what I feel for you isn't about protecting someone weak. It's about partnering with someone strong." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of me? Of wanting this? Of wanting you?" She looked up at him, tears threatening. Clayton made me feel like an object, like something to be used and discarded. I don't know how to. We figure it out together. Jacob's thumb brushed across her knuckles. However long it takes. Whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere. The dam broke. Eleanor surged forward, her arms wrapping around Jacob's neck, her face buried in his shoulder. He held her as she shook, his hands steady on her back, his voice murmuring reassurances she couldn't quite hear through her own sobs. When the storm passed, she pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to be close to someone without fear. Anytime you want to stop, you say so. Anytime something hurts, body or heart, you tell me. Can you do that?" Eleanor nodded. "I can try." The lessons in trust proved harder than learning to ride. Jacob moved through the world with such certainty, such easy strength, that Eleanor found herself constantly comparing his gentleness to Clayton's demands. Every time Jacob reached for her hand, part of her flinched. Every time he stood close, old instincts screamed to run. But he never pushed, never demanded more than she offered. And slowly, painfully, Eleanor began to unfurl like a flower in spring sun. 1 month after Clayton's arrest, a summer storm rolled across the valley with biblical fury. Eleanor was in the barn checking on the horses when the first thunderclap shook the rafters. Dancer whinnied nervously, and Eleanor moved to calm her, running soothing hands down the mare's neck. "Easy, girl. Just noise. Can't hurt you." Wise words. Eleanor turned to find Jacob climbing into the loft, rain dripping from his hat. "Roads are washed out. Won't be able to check the north pasture until tomorrow." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face in stark relief. Eleanor saw the exhaustion there. Jacob had been working 20-hour days to prepare for the cattle drive next month. "You need to rest," she said. In a bit, he settled into the hay, wincing slightly. Eleanor frowned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just twisted wrong moving that fence post." "Let me see." Jacob hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt. Eleanor's breath caught. A massive bruise spread across his ribs, purple, black, and angry. "Jacob, this could be broken." "It's not, just bruised." He tried to smile. "I've had worse." Eleanor knelt beside him, her fingers hovering over the injury without touching. "This needs wrapping and cold compress and—" "Eleanor," his hand caught hers. "I'm all right." "You're not," her voice broke. "You work yourself to exhaustion. You take care of everyone and never let anyone take care of you. When does it stop?" Jacob's expression softened. "When I stop being afraid." "Of what?" "Of failing again. Of not being enough." He looked away, jaw tight. "After Sarah died, I threw myself into work because stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering that I wasn't there when she needed me most." Eleanor sat back, understanding clicking into place. "You're trying to outrun grief." "Maybe." He laughed without humor. "How's that working for me?" "About as well as me trying to outrun fear." Eleanor took his hand properly now, lacing their fingers together. "We're both running, Jacob. From different things, but running all the same. What do we do instead?" "We stop." Eleanor met his eyes. "We stand still and face what scares us." "And what scares you right now?" Eleanor's heart raced. "How much I want to kiss you. How terrified I am that I'll break if I let myself care this much." Jacob's free hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, until his palm cradled her cheek. What if we don't break? What if we just bend? I don't know how. Neither do I. But we could learn together. The kiss, when it came, was gentle as rain. Jacob's lips brushed hers with devastating tenderness, asking rather than taking. Eleanor's hands found his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him. The barely leashed strength held in perfect check. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. That didn't hurt. Jacob laughed, the sound rich and warm. That's a low bar, Eleanor. It's my bar right now. She traced the line of his jaw with tentative fingers. Could we try again? We can try as many times as you want. They kissed again, deeper this time, Eleanor's fear melting into something warmer. Jacob's hands stayed respectful, one on her waist, one cupping her face, letting her control the pace and depth. When Eleanor pulled back, breathing hard, she found him watching her, with such naked longing it stole her breath. I need to tell you something, she whispered. About Clayton. She stopped, courage failing. You don't have to. I do. I need you to know. Eleanor forced the words out. He tried in his house before the wedding. I fought him off, but he hurt me. Not the worst way, but enough that I knew what he'd do once we were married. That's why I jumped from the coach. Jacob's jaw clenched, his whole body going rigid. Eleanor, I'm telling you so you understand why this is hard. Why touch feels like threat sometimes. Why I flinch when you move too fast. Thank you for trusting me with that. Jacob's voice was rough with suppressed rage. Not at her, she realized, but for her. I wish I could go back and... You can't. He's in prison. It's done. Eleanor took his hand. But I need you to be patient with me. Sometimes I'll be fine, and sometimes I'll need space. Can you do that? As long as you need. However you need. Jacob pressed a kiss to her forehead. We go at your pace. Always. Summer burned into autumn, painting the valley in gold and crimson. Eleanor found her rhythm at the ranch, managing books and supplies, teaching the cook new recipes, even helping with the horses. She'd become indispensable, and more than that, she'd become home. Jacob courted her with the patience of stone wearing down to sand. Wildflowers left on her pillow, a new side saddle crafted for her comfort. Long rides through the valley at sunset, his hand never straying from appropriate places. His conversation never pushing for more than she offered. But the want between them grew like summer heat, unspoken but undeniable. One evening in early October, they sat by the fire in the main house. Jacob was mending tack. Eleanor was reading, the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. What are you thinking about? Jacob asked, not looking up from his work. Us. Eleanor set down her book. About what happens next? Jacob's hands stilled. What do you want to happen? Eleanor stood, moving to stand before him. I want to not be afraid anymore. I want to be close to you without that voice in my head screaming danger. Jacob set aside the tack, looking up at her. Eleanor, teach me. She held out her hand. Teach me how to be touched without fear. Jacob took her hand, rising slowly. We go as slow as you need. You say stop, we stop. You say wait, we wait. Understood? Understood. He led her to the couch, sitting and guiding her to sit beside him. First lesson. Breathing. When fear comes, we breathe through it. Eleanor nodded, suddenly nervous. Jacob's arm settled around her shoulders, his touch warm through her blouse. How does this feel? He asked. good, scary, both. That's normal. His thumb traced small circles on her shoulder. Fear and desire can exist together. One doesn't negate the other. They sat like that for long minutes, Eleanor's head eventually finding his shoulder, her breathing syncing with his. Jacob's free hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. "Better?" he murmured. "Much." Eleanor tilted her face up. "Can we try kissing again?" Jacob's smile was gentle. "Always asking permission. I love that about you." The kiss started soft, but grew heated as Eleanor pressed closer, her hands sliding into his hair. Jacob's control was evident in the tension of his muscles, the careful placement of his hands. He was holding back, she realized, not from lack of want, but from abundance of respect. "Jacob," she whispered against his lips, "you can touch me. I need." "Where?" His voice was strained. "Tell me where you want my hands." "Everywhere." The word escaped as a gasp. "But go slow. Please, go slow." Jacob's hands moved with infinite patience, tracing her spine, cupping her waist, brushing against her ribs with feather-light pressure. Every touch asked permission. Every caress waited for her response. When his palms settled against her racing heart, Eleanor made a sound she didn't recognize. Part fear, part need, wholly vulnerable. "Too much?" Jacob started to pull away. "No." Eleanor caught his hand, pressing it firmly against her chest. "Don't stop. Please don't." Her voice broke on a sound that was half sob, half moan. The sensation of being touched with desire instead of ownership, with respect instead of entitlement, it unraveled something in her chest. Jacob's other hand cradled her face, his thumb catching tears she hadn't known were falling. "We can stop." "I can't take it," Eleanor gasped out, the words tumbling over each other. "But don't stop." "I can't, it's too much, but I need." Understanding dawned in Jacob's eyes. "You need to feel safe while feeling everything." "Yes." Eleanor's hands fisted in his shirt. "Show me I can survive this. Show me I can want without being hurt." Jacob shifted, gathering her into his lap, her ear pressed against his chest, where his heart thundered like hoofbeats. His arms wrapped around her, strong and protective, holding her together while she fell apart. "Listen to my heart," he murmured into her hair. "Feel how fast it's beating? That's fear too. I'm terrified of doing this wrong, of hurting you, of being another man who takes instead of gives." Eleanor's breath hitched. "You're nothing like—" "I know, but fear doesn't listen to logic." His lips brushed her temple. "So we're both scared, and we're both brave enough to try anyway. That's what makes this real." They stayed like that until Eleanor's trembling eased, until her breathing steadied, until she felt solid again in her own skin. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." Eleanor pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "For knowing that sometimes the bravest thing is to feel everything and survive it." Jacob's expression held such tenderness, it made her chest ache. "You're tougher than any rider I've met," he said quietly, and Eleanor heard the truth in every word. "Not because you don't break, but because you keep putting yourself back together." The proposal came on a Tuesday morning, simple as sunrise. They were checking the fence line, Eleanor having insisted on coming along despite the early hour. The valley spread before them, painted gold by autumn light, the mountains purple against the horizon. "Eleanor," Jacob said, reining in his horse, "I have a question." She turned, struck by the nervous set of his shoulders. Jacob Thornton, who faced down storms and stampedes with equal calm, looked genuinely anxious. "Marry me." Eleanor's heart stopped. "What?" I know it's not romantic. I know you deserve better than this. No ring, no fancy speech. But I can't wait any more to ask. Jacob dismounted, moving to stand beside Dancer. I love you. I love your strength and your fear, and the way you've rebuilt yourself piece by piece. I love coming home to you. I love the way you make the ranch feel like more than just work. I love... He stopped, voice rough. I love everything, Eleanor. Say yes. Eleanor slid from her saddle, her legs unsteady. You love me? Desperately, completely. Jacob took her hands. I'll spend every day proving it if you let me. Eleanor's mind raced. Marriage. The word had meant prison, ownership, violence. But looking at Jacob, she saw none of those things. She saw partnership, home, choice. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you. Jacob pulled her into his arms, lifting her clean off her feet, his laughter mixing with hers. When he set her down, his kiss was fierce and tender and full of promise. I don't have a ring yet, he said against her lips. Eleanor pulled the sapphire from her pocket. She'd taken to carrying it as a reminder of how far she'd come. Use this. My mother wore it for 30 years of happy marriage. Let it be lucky again. Jacob took the ring with reverent hands. You sure? This is your last piece of her. No, I'm my last piece of her. This is just a ring. Eleanor held out her left hand. Make it ours. The sapphire caught the morning light as Jacob slid it onto her finger. A perfect fit. They married 3 weeks later, in a ceremony so simple it made Eleanor weep. The traveling preacher spoke about partnership and respect. Jacob's ranch hands stood as witnesses, grinning like fools. Even the sheriff attended, having become a friend during the legal proceedings against Clayton. Jacob wore his Sunday best, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. Eleanor wore a dress of deep blue borrowed from the sheriff's wife, wildflowers woven into her hair, her hand steady in Jacob's as they spoke their vows. I promise to honor your strength, Jacob said, his voice carrying across the small gathering. To protect your choices, to stand beside you, not in front of you. To love you in fear and in courage, in sorrow and in joy, until my last breath. Eleanor's vows came from her heart, unrehearsed and honest. I promise to trust you with my whole self, the broken parts and the healing parts. To build something with you that's ours alone. To be your partner in all things. To love you exactly as you are. No conditions, no exceptions, always. When the preacher pronounced them married, Jacob's kiss was gentle, mindful of their audience, but his eyes promised much more for later. The celebration was small but joyful. They danced in the barn to fiddle music, shared a simple cake, laughed until Eleanor's sides ached. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire, Jacob swept his bride into his arms and carried her toward the house. You know I can walk, Eleanor protested, laughing. Humor me. I've been dreaming of this moment since the day you walked into my life, looking like fury personified. He carried her over the threshold, their threshold now, and set her down gently in the bedroom he'd prepared. Candles flickered on every surface, casting warm light across fresh linens and wildflowers in simple vases. Jacob, Eleanor breathed. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. He cupped her face, suddenly serious. I need you to know, everything we talked about still applies. You say stop, we stop. This is ours to figure out together. Eleanor's heart swelled. I know. I trust you. Say it if you need to, Jacob murmured, his fingers working the buttons of her dress with practiced patience. Say if it hurts. Say if it's too much. Eleanor let him undress her, vulnerability and desire warring in her chest. When she stood before him in nothing but candlelight, she felt exposed in every way possible. Jacob's hands traced her skin like she was something precious, his lips following with whispered praise. "You're perfect, strong, mine, yours," Eleanor agreed, her hands exploring the hard plains of his chest, the scars she'd memorized. "And you're mine." They came together slowly, carefully, Jacob watching her face for any sign of distress. Eleanor felt the stretch of unfamiliar intimacy, the vulnerability of complete trust. "Breathe," Jacob murmured, holding himself still. "We have all night, our lives. No rush." Eleanor focused on his eyes, on the love and patience she found there, on the knowledge that this was her choice, her partner, her future. "I can't take it," she gasped, as sensation built, overwhelmed by feeling too much and somehow not enough. "But don't stop, please." Jacob's lips found hers, his body moving with hers in a rhythm as old as time. "You're tougher than any rider I've met," he whispered against her mouth, and Eleanor heard the truth of it, felt it in her bones. She was tough, she was brave, she was loved, and when pleasure finally broke over her like a wave, Jacob was there to catch her, to hold her through the storm, to whisper her name like a prayer. 5 years later, Eleanor stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Jacob teach their daughter to ride. Little Sarah, named for the woman Eleanor had never met but honored daily, sat proudly in the saddle, her father's hand steady on the reins. "I'm doing it, Mama," Sarah called, her voice bright with joy. "You are, sweetheart," Eleanor called back, her hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child grew. The ranch had prospered. Eleanor's management had doubled their profits, her investment in breeding stock proving as sound as Jacob's trust in her judgment. They'd bought the neighboring property, hired more hands, built a small bunkhouse for seasonal workers. But more than that, they'd built a life, a partnership, a love that grew stronger with every challenge faced together. Jacob looked up, catching Eleanor's eye across the yard. The smile he gave her held 5 years of mornings, waking up together, of storms weathered side by side, of promises kept and trust earned. Eleanor smiled back, her hand tracing circles on her belly, her heart full of gratitude for the desperate day she'd stumbled into Silver Ridge with nothing but fear and her mother's ring. She'd come looking for survival and found everything. Epilogue. The Sunday afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window as Eleanor rolled out pie dough, flour dusting her arms. Sarah sat at the table, laboriously writing her letters under her father's patient instruction. Their son, James, napped in his cradle by the hearth. "That's a perfect A, baby girl," Jacob praised, and Sarah beamed. Eleanor watched them, these two pieces of her heart walking around outside her body, and felt the old fear try to surface. What if she lost them? What if happiness was temporary? But then Jacob looked up, his gray eyes finding hers, and she saw the same fear reflected back. The difference was, they'd learned to hold fear and love in the same hands, to acknowledge one without letting it destroy the other. "I love you," she mouthed silently. "I love you more," he mouthed back, grinning at their old argument. Sarah looked between them and sighed dramatically. "You two are being mushy again." "Get used to it," Jacob laughed, pulling Eleanor close despite her floury hands. "We plan on being mushy for the next 50 years. Eleanor leaned into his embrace, breathing in the scent of leather and sunshine and home. At least, she agreed. Outside, the valley stretched golden under autumn light, the mountains standing eternal guard. The ranch bustled with life and purpose. The future spread before them like unmarked territory, full of possibility and promise. And Eleanor, who'd once had nothing but fear and a sapphire ring, now had everything that mattered. A partner who chose her daily, children who knew only love, and the unshakable knowledge that she was tough enough to handle whatever came next. Because she'd learned the truth Jacob had tried to tell her from the very beginning. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about healing and trying again, about choosing courage over fear, about building something beautiful from the ruins of what came before. The end, but also the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Eleanor and Jacob's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.